Welcome, colleagues. Thank you for joining us at today's program. We'll be started shortly. Thank you and welcome to our Mentoring for Achievement and Excellence program. I'm pleased to introduce Douglas Haynes, Vice Chancellor for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, and Chief Diversity Officer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon on this gorgeous Southern California day. On behalf of Chancellor Gilman and our Executive Vice Chancellor Hal Stern, I want to warmly welcome all of you from your homes or wherever you are to this annual Mentoring for Achievement and Excellence program today. I want to thank you for joining us. It is particularly gratifying to know that so many of you took time to be in community. I want to use this opportunity as well to thank 4 special UCI partners who are co-supporting this event with the Office of Inclusive Excellence. They are Tom Andriola, our Vice Chancellor for Information Technology and Data, Willie Banks, our Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, Ron Cortez, the Vice Chancellor for the Division of Finance and Administration, and Steve Goldstein, Vice Chancellor of Health Affairs, overseeing UCI Health, the schools, centers, and institutes in the Susan and Henry Samueli College of Health Sciences. From OIE's current efforts to eradicate biased language and technology, to its founding of the Women in Technology Group, to ongoing activities of our partners in student affairs, finance and administration, and the Samueli College, these partners bring tremendous commitment to inclusive excellence. Vice Chancellor Andriola, Banks, Cortez, and Goldstein are champions of equity, diversity, inclusion. So I want to thank them publicly for that dedication, as well as modeling the leadership and mentoring values that we honor today. So why are we here today? Well, this event is a UCI enterprise-wide celebration to honor the talents of so many individuals who invest time in supporting and nurturing the talents of others. My hope would be that this becomes part of who we are as a world-renowned enterprise, not only for forging new knowledge, but also valuing diversity and collaborative spirit that strengthens one another, particularly during this time of COVID. Now, how will this afternoon's program unfold? I want to give you a brief overview. Our format starts off by hearing about inspiring ideas that connect mentoring and leadership development from our invited speaker. I will then briefly recognize just a few of the UCI members who have given us permission to acknowledge the awards that they have received this past year for their mentoring. I then will call upon two of my colleagues, Vice Provost Jillian Hayes and Associate Director of OIE, Roxanne Silver, to join me in brief presentations of three types of awards. These are the Tom Angel Fellowship Awards, the Francis M. Leslie Decade Mentor Excellence Award, and our inaugural Carol Connor Equity Advisor Impact Award. So, what is a mentor and why should we honor them? The definition typically used is someone who is an experienced and trusted advisor, does not fully capture the trust, confidence, and hope that good mentors inspire in us. Their support always brings us awareness about resources and opportunities to improve whatever the interests of the moment. And yet their advice is tempered by restraint, not to be prescriptive, but to guide us to the tools to develop our own next actions. We also know how a good mentor counsels beyond just identifying resources, but they bear witness, sponsor, and speak on our behalf to promote us even when we are not at the table or in the room. Mentors have the type of long-range impact where they not only inspire us to try and do our best, but nurture a legacy of each one teach one to mentor others. Mentoring is a self-forging cycle of inspiration, and we are so delighted to have with us today a world-renowned journalist to inspire us further about these connections. Soledad O'Brien is a leader in her own right. Through the power of storytelling, she brings a fresh perspective on diverse and contemporary issues to foster change in our communities and organizations. As the host of the syndicated political show, Matter of Fact with Soledad O'Brien, she has established herself as one of the most recognized names in broadcasting by telling the stories behind the most important issues and events of the day. A champion of diversity, she gives voice to the underserved and disenfranchised through her Emmy-winning reporting and acclaimed documentary, Black in America and Latino in America, while also appearing as host on PBS NewsHour and HBO's Real Sports with Brian Gumbel as a correspondent. A prominent philanthropist, Mrs. O'Brien is the founder of Powerful, a foundation that mentors and funds college tuition and expenses for young women. Together with her husband, Brad Raymond, Ms. O'Brien started the Powerful Foundation on a nonprofit organization that helps bridge the gap of opportunities for young minority women from low-income families to attend college with financial assistance, mentoring and holistic support to and through their degrees. This support puts the women on a path to success and hopefully in return enables them to pay the support forward for other young women like them in their communities. Soledad is a graduate of Harvard University and currently lives with her husband, Brad, and their 4 children in Manhattan. Please join me in welcoming Soledad O'Brien to share insights with us today about mentoring for leadership. Thank you.
And thank you for having me. It's always such an amazing opportunity to talk about what I've learned and done well and done really wrong when it comes to mentoring and the lessons that we have learned, especially with our nonprofit. I know it's nice weather in California. It's actually nice weather in New York for a change. We're at 60 degrees, so I will welcome everybody from the very nice weather in New York as well. And a big congratulations on everyone who's being honored as a mentor today. I thought today I'd talk a little bit about mentoring and then take some of your questions because it's been so critical in my life, both the mentoring that I personally have received. And of course, it's really ultimately was the reason that my husband and I started the Powerful Foundation. It began in the spring right after Hurricane Katrina, which I covered as a reporter being based in New Orleans. There was so much that I realized we could do more, bigger, that change we could make if we were mentoring and supporting students. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that story. But first, a little bit about me and TV news. I started working in TV news in 1987. My first job was removing staples from bulletin boards around all 4 floors of WBZ TV. And you might say to yourself, why Soledad? That's a job. And yes, it was. It didn't pay very well. My parents, who'd spent a whole bunch of money on my education at Harvard, to say that they were disappointed does not come close to how they felt, but I loved it. I loved being part of a team whose ultimate job was to tell stories and inform the public. Obviously, I was the lowest member of the team, but I knew there was much more than answering the phone and removing staples and running scripts. And I pretty quickly figured out where the power lay, right? And it wasn't with our morning anchor team. I'm embarrassed to say I cannot remember their names. The power ultimately, right, was with producers who would decide whose narrative was elevated, whose story would be told, how much time would they get, who'd be part of it and who would not be included at all. And I always thought, well, maybe if I could figure out how to get my voice in this, I could have an opportunity to kind of change the narrative in ways that I wanted to. But basically, when I started in 1987, I was an extremely low-level, underpaid, woefully underpaid production assistant. And as I climbed the ladder, it never really occurred to me early on that I would have the opportunity to cover some of the biggest stories of our time, whether it was the Haiti earthquake, Hurricane Katrina, the Southeast Asian tsunami, the tsunami that took place in Japan, or documentaries that I ended up doing. I've done about 50, more or less, Black in America, Latino in America, education in America, Muslim in America. All of these stories, we tried to grapple with, what is the American story, or how do we tell the point of view once we land in the middle of chaos, and how do we ferret out what the story is? But when I started, I spent a lot of my time and energy just trying to figure out the story. My very first live shot was a live shot. The San Francisco Giants had made it into the playoffs. And I was such a new reporter that they sent me not to go cover the story, but sent me to a bar to go cover other people who weren't going to watch it in person and do a reporting on how they were in the bar. And as you can imagine, it was an absolute disaster. In fact, I went back to the office because my live shot was so terrible. And my boss started talking to me about smaller markets. Like, there are smaller cities in California you could be working in. I called back to my mentor, my boss, Bob Bazell, who was a reporter and did a lot of producing at NBC News, in hysterics. I was crying. And he gave me great advice, which I think is in part what mentors do, right? He said, whatever you do, don't leave that job. Make them fire you if they have to, but stick it out. This is a learnable skill. And I've always felt like mentors have entered my life at exactly the right moment. He was right. It was a learnable skill. Within a few months, I was able to figure out the gig of doing live shots. It's not impossible. It's a learnable skill. And I was doing all the things you do in local news. So for example, there was a black mambo snake on the loose in San Francisco when I was there, and I did that breathless coverage. I covered a guy believed that his roommate who had passed away had been reincarnated as his cat. And I did a live shot holding the cat over my shoulder. My husband, by the way, calls this entire era not my best work, but that's what I did. I would stand at the fish market and carry big fish and tell everybody the fish market's open. I would stand on the Bay Bridge and tell everybody, don't come to the Bay Bridge, the winds are high, because the winds were high. But mostly my reporting was very basic, kind of from my viewpoint. And it wasn't until I started working with mentors who said, you can do more, you can do better. Like, you have to go back to what's the job? Like, what do you think the job of being a reporter is? And I think I started figuring it out when and successfully when Hurricane Katrina happened. I spent the first week after that storm, I was working at CNN at the time, doing interviews with state and local and federal officials. Many of them were, obviously they were disasters, and it was a disaster. And I remember landing in New Orleans and meeting a woman who was pushing her children in a shopping cart with all her possessions. And she was asking me about how did she get a bus out of town? And I was thinking, like, I don't know. I can't believe you're asking me. And our next months would be spent accompanying the Coast Guard while they would pluck people off of the roofs. I'm sure you remember those videos of people who were trapped on the roofs waiting to be rescued. Mayor at the time, his sort of final advice to his people was grab a freaking axe. That's a quote, because he thought people would probably have to cut their way through their attics onto the roofs to be saved. And he wasn't wrong about that. And I remember witnessing it all as a reporter and just thinking, like, wow, this is such a complete and utter failure for people who need it the most. Like, this is insane. What could I do as a reporter? How could I tell stories that mattered? How could I bring a sense of urgency to reporting, but also how could I help as a human being? Like, what could we do to make this better? There were so many young people, talented young people, who were just stuck, whose future seemed impossible to even navigate. And we were trying to figure out what we could do. I think I knew at some point I'd start covering race, mostly because of that experience in Hurricane Katrina, right? There were so many questions. Why were people abandoned? Why did they not seem to matter? Why did people not leave? And it kept coming back to this idea that there was this incredible inequality in the country that people often didn't really want to talk about. And so I started diving into race. And I think that was going to sort of be my path because, my parents used to tell me the story of how they met. My mom was Black and Cuban, and my dad was white and Australian. They passed away about a year and a half ago. The story they would tell was how they met because they both went to daily mass. So any Catholics in the audience will know the entire point of the story is you should be going to daily mass. Anyway, every day my mom would walk to daily mass, and my dad, because he had a car, he would drive. As the story goes, my parents used to tell me and my 5 brothers and sisters. And every day my dad would drive by my mom and wind down the window of his car. Young people, there were no power windows. You had to kind of lean in and do it. And he would ask her if she wanted a ride to mass every day, daily mass. And every day my mother would say, no, thank you, because you don't take a ride from someone you don't know well. Well, one day she decided, in fact, to take a ride. The rest was history. My dad, being no fool, decided that he would ask her out, and they made a date to go on a date. But because it was Baltimore in 1958, every restaurant they went to, because my mom was Black and my dad was white, turned them away. Restaurant after restaurant after restaurant said, no, she can't come in. You, to my dad, can come in. 2 of you certainly can't sit together. And eventually my mom took my dad back to her apartment and whipped him up an amazing meal of Cuban food. She was a fantastic cook. And the entire point of her story, just in case you've missed it, is not just you should be going to daily mass, but also, as she would tell us, girls, if you can cook, you can get a man. I like to say I can't make it, but I can make it happen in about 20 minutes or less. I'm not much of a cook. My parents decided that they would get married at the end of 1958 when interracial marriage was illegal in the state where they lived, Maryland. And so they drove to DC and got hitched, and then they drove back and lived illegally as a married couple in Maryland, by the way, in 16 other states. There were laws that said interracial couples couldn't marry. And their friends would tell them, whatever you do, do not have children, because biracial children will not fit in this world. I'm number 506. My parents were terrible listeners every step of the way. And in fact, my little brother was born the very year the Supreme Court would decide to overturn the ban on interracial marriage. My parents' marriage was now legal, and they were on their 6th child. And my mom used to say, if you wait for people to get with what you're doing, you might be waiting a long time, which was actually some very good advice. And when I asked my parents, so what was it like to live in Baltimore in the early 1960s when my 2 sisters were born, my mom said, people used to spit on us as we walked down the street as an interracial couple with 2 small children. I was like, oh my goodness, oh my gosh, what did you do? And my mom said this thing that was so interesting to me, and it framed for me a lot of my reporting, but also framed how I thought and how I think about, like, what does it mean to be a human being today? What does it require of us? What does humanity mean? What are we supposed to be giving to be in this community? My mom used to say, Lovey, she called me Lovey, Lovey, we knew America was better than that. And one of the reasons I love that phrase was because it requires a lot of opt-in, right? There's no sense of opting out. Like, we knew America was better than that. So we had to opt in and help it get to where it is. And I do think that this concept of being part of a solution and making the world better, and not just admiring the problem from a distance, but really opting in to help, made a big difference to me. And so back to Hurricane Katrina, for me, I began to think about, well, what does opting in mean? What does that look like in my life? So we started our foundation in the wake of Hurricane Katrina. I met a girl, she was 18 years old, a high school graduate. She had graduated in the top 10% of her class at a very mediocre high school. And we met in the parking lot of a McDonald's, where she brought her transcripts. And she also informed me that she needed $6,862 or something like that in order to go to college. Her mother had left the state looking for work, and so had left her in New Orleans while she moved to California. The mom moved to California. And I remember thinking at that moment, like, what kind of a kid who's left home to finish her last year of high school does it, pulls it off, is successful? What kind of a kid applies to college and gets in with absolutely, positively no hope at all of going? Like, what kind of guts and stamina and vision do you have to have in order to say, I can do this, when there's absolutely not a modicum of hope that you're going to be able to do it? Like, that was the kind of kid that I wanted to help. And so I found her very inspiring, and we decided that we would take her on, right? Like, that, to me, that was a tremendous evidence of faith in yourself, and also a real bravery. We talk a lot in reporting about bravery, but to me, that was real bravery. And all I could do was support this amazing thing that I was doing. What I was doing was so minor compared to what she needed. We were able to raise money and send her off to school. I would eventually go on to do her commencement address at Spelman, which was a lot of fun. It was like having a child. And so, we have been able to, over the years since that time, raise just under $7 million to send girls. We picked girls as a subset of who we would support, to send girls to and through school. And I think for us, it was very important to commit to the getting to school. You could take great students, but where we saw problems with these girls would struggle with the actual, once they got in, like the getting it done, that actually frequently it was like death by 1,000 paper cuts, a car with a blown tire, feeling overwhelmed by the work, feeling you weren't good enough to do the work. And that while they definitely needed money, clearly, to pay tuition and get through school, they almost, maybe even more importantly, they needed support. They needed mentors. They needed the help, the team behind them. And I think what it made me just think what I was really getting from my parents growing up, which, like any teenager, I didn't spend a whole heck of a lot of time thinking about. But what they gave me was stability, right? They gave me a real benefit in knowing that their jobs were stable, their home was stable, that For the most part, my college would be paid for with some loans, that it wasn't going to be on me. Most of the scholars that we have, their parents might have the money one month, might not have the money the next month. And we decided that that model of like stability, we've got you. We've got you. You're going to go through college too, and through college. And as I do with my own darling children, you know, even if we have to kill ourselves trying to get you through, we are going to kill ourselves to get you through. And so we started with 6 students for the Powerful Foundation, quickly moved to 9, then got to 20, and then 25 a year that we were sending. And it was really a remarkable, you know, support meant paying tuition, certainly. Support meant helping with classes, teaching girls how to advocate for themselves, which sometimes means red flagging when you feel like you're not going to do well in a class. And so you need to tell someone so that you can get support. In our case, support also meant burying parents. We had 3 parents die over the time, and with students who had no money to get their parents' bodies out of a morgue, to helping students get jobs and getting opportunities and getting internships. Like, what did it look like? I mean, imagine if your parents never ever worked in an office, would you know how to work in an office? Would you know the secret handshake? At one point, I will confess, my husband did say, we have 4 kids of our own. Why are we doing this? But I think it really, for us, became an opportunity to give back in a way for so much that we had been given, so much that we just got for no reason at all, right? We just lucked into very stable parents, a very solidly middle-class existence, which meant not a lot of drama. Today, we've had 36 graduates, PhD, lawyers, scientists, nurses, social workers, math teachers. And I'm proud of what our young women have become. You know, it's often not just the going through school and going to classes. For example, one of our scholars who interned at an investment bank while she was homeless, she's one of the top ranked chess players in the world. She would be the first Black female chess master in the country. But her family was living in a homeless shelter. And I remember her first couple of days working at an investment bank. And she said to me, and she was right. She said, I don't own any of the right clothes. Like, everybody who's an intern at this bank, their dads or their moms are clients of the bank. And then there's me. And she was right. Luckily, because I'm a TV anchor, I had a bunch of Black pencil skirts and silk blouses, and that's kind of the wardrobe. But you know, the help was not just, can you do the work? She was a brilliant girl, absolutely could do the work, right? It was, how do I fit in what I feel so far behind in those social networks and that context of, you know, do I know the secret handshake? You know, and so for me, the other lesson that we learned, which was not always an easy lesson, was the art of listening, which I think is sometimes not spoken about very much. I remember a young woman named Omira, great girl, who talked a lot. We met at a donor conference, and I was interviewing her, and she talked a lot at this donor conference, very, very wealthy people. She was supposed to talk about mentoring, and she said, you know, she wanted to talk about why she stayed in school when she was thinking about giving up school. And she said, you know, people often will give you stuff, right? They'll tell you what you need. Oh, we have STEM classes for you. And oh, you probably want dance classes. And oh, you probably need to do this kind of art or whatever. And she said, you know, no one would ever listen. No one ever asked me, what did you need, Omira? And so we were talking about her best mentor. And she said, you know, she just listened to me. She just asked me, what do you need? And I said, well, what'd you tell her when she asked? And she said, I told her I need soap because I live in my car and I smell. And I'm going to drop out of high school because I'm embarrassed of the way I smell, right? Which is on one hand so revealing and also so simple, but you would never know if you hadn't spent the time listening to what this girl needed. She didn't need STEM classes, which are amazing, but she didn't need them. She needed soap. And in fact, the next day her mentor came with a basket of soap, and she would go on to graduate from high school and finish at George Washington University and not drop out of school. And I've not ever been perfect in my efforts to be a mentor. I've certainly misjudged. I've certainly not listened. I've certainly tried to help as an advisor and a sounding board. And occasionally I will help edit a college paper on my laptop. But I think our main strategy has been stability and having someone who roots for you and someone who guides you and someone who gives you advice. And honestly, that's not a lot. It's not. It's a very low bar, right? Literally anybody can do that. And in my case, we knew that young women need advocates, sometimes on the job, like I had, someone who in the moment gives you advice, or sometimes people who are going to help you get through the academics, or sometimes people are going to write a check and help you get through school, paying for it. What can you do? What can you do to help? My mom used to say, America is better than that. And I think she really teed up a scenario of, so then, ergo, what are you going to do to jump into that conversation to help it along, to help it be better? What does it need? And what can you contribute? I'll stop there because I want to take some questions, and maybe in our conversation, we can talk a little bit about some of the data around why mentoring works. I think most of it is really basic and most people know it, but I'd love to take any of the questions that you have.
Thank you, Soledad. And again, I just want to echo that. Use chat, the question and answer, to submit your questions. But while they come in, I wanted to sort of share a few questions that were provided during the registration. And you made a couple of points that really have sort of resonated. One is, mentors see the potential in other people. And often when they don't see it in themselves. But you also had said something else that's so important, that there's an art of listening to being a mentor. And so I guess I want to raise the question, when do mentors fail?
Well, let me jump in because I have failed, and I'm a good, literally. And I think actually anybody who does a lot of mentoring has good examples of where they failed. I think mentors fail really first when they don't listen. I thought it was very interesting to see the crowds. This crowd was extremely wealthy people, right? And when she said that, they all sort of gasped, right? Because they're the people who say, oh, we're putting together a STEM session and we've got this. And I think they realize, like, wow, you're right. We don't really meet students who need services, and we don't ask them, we tell them. And so I think I have been guilty of that. I think mentors fail when you don't take that moment to actually solve the problem that is the student's problem. Many of our students struggle with hunger. Sometimes the way to fix that is to give them food. People who struggle with housing issues need housing, right? And so, there are sometimes challenging ways to solve that, but sometimes the solution is just to solve that problem. And we found a big issue that we have not been able to solve. Often some schools, depending on where they're enrolled in college, have a lot of mental health services, but a lot of young people need to, one, lose the stigma around seeking help for mental health issues. And then also sometimes, depending on where they're in school, need help paying for it. And, that's been a real challenge for us, figuring out how to do that in a way that's effective, especially during a pandemic where a lot of our students are remote. So, I think you fail because you don't listen, and you fail because you overpromise, and you fail because you don't do the basic things that a mentor can do, which is just be there, just be the person who can give advice and give help. My mentors who were the most helpful and useful to me were just there when I called crying and said, oh my God, I've just messed this up. I'm never going to work again, right? And they were just there like, well, let's walk through it. So walk me through what happened. Talk to me about this, and they kind of they help you get to a solution. Through college, they help you figure out career options. They help you navigate messy scenarios in the office. They help you, come up with strategies for getting ahead. They help you decide, when do you leave? When is it a good time to jump ship? I've had so many great mentors, and I think really what they did was just kind of let me lead the conversation, and they listened and then answered the question that I was asking, not the question that I wasn't asking.
Right. Well, here is a question from Bonnie Hughes. Have you had to adapt or change your mentorship approach when working with different generations and millennials, Generation Z?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, only old people email. period, full stop. So do not try to reach any young person and think that you're going to get them by sending them a nice email. It will not happen. Yeah, and so yeah, we certainly, number one, just had to make sure we were communicating in the style that they were communicating it, because a lot of people don't check their email particularly frequently. And so my generation, which was very heavily reliant on email, very quickly had to move to texting. And then we had to really come up with rules, just like my family had pretty strict rules about, what things were covered. How do we deal with issues? Are cell phones covered? Is housing covered? I mean, for a foundation, you have literally rules about what you cover and support for people. And we just wanted clarity, what is burying someone's parent covered? My answer was obviously yes. We're here to support the students in any way they could possibly need support. But I think it was just kind of walking through the sense of like clarity of what we do. And yeah, absolutely. I have found whatever generation, deliverables, whether you're talking about deliverables for college students, you're talking about deliverables for high school students, deliverables in the workplace for people you're mentoring. I think that's a piece of clarity. Next time we meet, here's what we need. Here's what we have to have. So across all generations, I think deliverables are very, very useful.
Well, speaking of deliverables, I have a question from Evan Clark, who asks, what do you consider your biggest accomplishment thus far?
In terms of mentoring, in terms of, I think if you've only gotten your youngest children through 9th grade, you can't sort of count yourself like that you can't sort of be like, parenting, I've rocked it. I think I'm not there yet. I think probably my biggest accomplishment across the board has been that I've been very willing to give a piece of my platform to help other people. And sometimes that was in my reporting to say, I have this platform, so I'm going to tell this story over here. And sometimes that's, I have this platform, so I'm going to make sure that this girl gets an opportunity and a job, and I'm going to advocate for her. I've always felt like I was very lucky. I just, you realize pretty quickly when you mentor people that your parents supporting you. Not everybody gets that. Your parents being able to pay for things. Not everybody gets that. I remember when I was a freshman in college, I overspent on my phone bill, $400. For our scholars, they'd have to drop out of school. Like there's just not that money for that. And I remember my dad being so mad while he was practically spitting nickels, as he's writing the check for $400 to the phone company. But not for a moment was it, I guess you're not going back. Yeah. I guess this is it for college, right? So many of our scholars, they don't get a second chance and they don't get a third chance. So maybe what I've been able to do is help provide people who really deserve it. And even some people who don't deserve it, a second chance and a third chance. Because I know people gave me a second chance and a third chance, and often I deserved it, but a couple of times I did not deserve it. And they were kind enough and generous enough and a good enough mentor and sponsor to believe in me and what I could accomplish.
Sure. Well, there's another question. This is from Doug Everhart, and this is what he writes. In this time of racial reckoning in our society, many are advocating and fighting for recognition of their race and ethnic identity. Mixed race identity adds the additional challenging of feeling like you may not have a clear racial or ethnic identity. What is the role of mixed race folks in this era when we're fighting for against racial injustice?
I think the fight against racial injustice is a fight that's open to everybody, whether you can be a white person whose parents came over on the Mayflower, or your family showed up from Africa 6 months ago and you're now in the country. I never think about that in the fight for racial justice. I do think that when it comes to trying to, figure out our mixed race people, how do they identify, or honestly, really any category, my strategy has always been, what do you like to be called? When I put people on TV, I say to them, so how do I pronounce your name? And what do you want your title to be? Like I am happy to make this work in any way you want. And I think sometimes we have I have friends who I can call Black, and they'd say they're mixed race. I have friends who are clearly mixed who call themselves Black. I feel like I'm Black, but I'm mixed race. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. And I don't think talking, I think it helps in my conversations about racial identity. I don't think it detracts from it. I know people who look extremely white who will tell you they're Black. I know people who are Black who will tell you they're not Black. My strategy has been, what makes you comfortable? What do you want to be called? How do you identify? How do you want to have this conversation? It seems like so little to give. Just like when people say to me, you want to be Mrs. or you want to be Miss? You want to be, whatever. And so I find it so easy. And I think it's separate from that conversation about how do you fight against racial injustice? I actually think we should assume that everybody has a role in that fight. My husband is a middle-aged white dude, and often, we'll have conversations. For example, he would complain about being on manels, right? These panels of all white men who look like him. And I said to him, one strategy might be to use your leverage at the moment you're called. Say, I would love to do your panel. Here's what I need to do to be on that panel. It needs to be 50% diverse. It needs to have this number of women. It needs to have, right? Like, here's what I want. And when you get that in your panel, I'm going to hold that date, and you call me when you have that, right? And suddenly you're the 600-pound gorilla saying, I'd love to say yes, but what I'm not doing is a manel. I think often people will say, well, it's not my panel. I don't control it. I don't really have an ability to help fight for equity or equality or opportunity, but you do. You just have to figure out where your in is. And then I think it's everybody's responsibility to say, well, in this moment, I can say, here's what I need to see. Here are my values. Here's what I need to see.
We have time, Soledad, for one question, and I want to give it to Alex Hammer. And he has an interesting question that follows up from Doug's. And it is, for mentees who identify as people of color, are there certain qualities they should look for in a mentor so they can truly understand their experience?
For mentees,
yes,
what they should look for in a mentor is everything. Literally, you cannot go wrong. I think the bigger issue I have seen in mentees is often young Black women want to be mentored by Black women. I think that's amazing. Definitely should do that. But that also means you should run and figure out other people who look nothing like you and see if they can be your mentor too. It's just very easy to not do that. And it's really helpful to push out of your comfort zone. Why? First of all, really useful to have someone advocating for you who doesn't look like you. Really amazingly powerful to have someone who's on the phone saying, I think this person is great. And so making sure that you are constantly challenging yourself to say, not, I don't know, this guy over here, I don't think he knows what my experience is like. Help him learn and help yourself learn about other people. And you'll find that you can have an amazing relationship, which will be useful because mentors should help you get to the next level. I think it's, if you just kind of stay in your comfort zone, hey, she's like this, she's from here, and I'm like this, and I'm from here. That's amazing. And that's sometimes a great mentor when you want to talk about microaggressions. It's really helpful to have someone who understands what you're talking about versus somebody who's like, what's a microaggression? Right. But you need then multiple mentors because it really will help you grow, and it will really expand your network of contacts and opportunities so much more than just kind of sticking with, this is what I'm comfortable with. These are the people who are like me. I don't have to step out of my comfort zone. They get me right away. They totally understand me. I think if you're looking for mentors, and by the way, you can have lots of mentors, right? You can have mentors you're meeting with every 6 months, and mentors you're meeting with once a month, and mentors who you're calling crying, when your boyfriend breaks up with you. Like, there's a whole range of people who can be in your life.
I really appreciate your answer to that question to Alex, because I think it puts the mentee in the driver's seat, ironically, because you are identifying mentors who can facilitate your journey. And I think that given how diverse we are in many ways where we work and often where we live, I think being attentive to understanding how individual relationships can sort of serve your journey, right? rather than assuming that you can only have a finite collection of individuals. You know, I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you joining us this afternoon. I truly appreciated learning more about you. I think many members of the UCI community are familiar with you with your terrific reporting, but what was particularly striking is how you describe your journey and the way in which individuals helped facilitate your growth, but above all, how you in turn have paid it forward in so many different ways in your reporting, in your attention to equity and issues of race, in the remarkable foundation that you and your husband, Brad, established, powerful, just an amazing way to provide an ecosystem for remarkably talented young people to thrive, right?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I so appreciate the opportunity to address everyone.
Terrific. Well, have a very good rest of the day. And we're going to resume with our awards recognition. And of course, you are encouraged to stay. But thank you again. Terrific. Colleagues, I'm going to now pivot as the word of the day. And I want to turn now to recognizing members of our campus community. And so when our office started looking into the types of mentoring awards presented across UCI, we were both pleased and stunned to see nearly 50 recipients listed across the campus for the past year. In full disclosure, I am sure that this is the tip of the iceberg in terms of those who are formally recognized for mentoring work. But let me take a moment to thank the awardees who did respond to indicate that they would take these moments to recognize their achievements. And so please watch the screen as we scroll through individuals who have been recognized for their mentoring across campus. Afterward, we'll resume.
If you ever find yourself stuck in the middle of the sea, I'll sail the world to find you. If you ever find yourself lost in the dark and you can't see, I'll be the light to guide you. Find out what we're made of. When we are called to help our friends in need, you can count on me like 1, 2, 3, I'll be there. And I know when I need it, I can count on you like 4, 3, 2, and you'll be there. 'Cause that's what friends are supposed to do, oh yeah. Ooh, ooh, yeah, yeah. If you're tossing and you're turning and you just can't fall asleep, I'll sing a song beside you. And if you ever forget how much you really mean to me, every day I will remind you. Oh, find out what we're made of when we are called to help our friends in need. You can count on me like 1, 2, 3, I'll be there. And I know when I need it, I can count on you like 4, 3, 2, and you'll be there. 'Cause that's what friends are supposed to do, oh yeah. Ooh, ooh, yeah, friends are supposed to do. Oh yeah. Ooh, ooh. You can count on me, 'cause I can count on you.
What an impressive display of the anteater spirit. That scroll just described the tip of the iceberg of so many people who have contributed to supporting members of the campus community to maximize their potential. And I want to thank UCI colleagues who have made such important contributions to the collaborative spirit and engagement of learning through their mentoring. Now, please join me in welcoming Vice Provost Jillian Hayes to tell us more about the Tom Angel Fellowship Awards. I want to thank Jillian for her vigilance to ensure care and support to graduate students during these challenging times. She will share insights about another champion of graduate students, Tom Angel, during her remarks.
Thank you so much, Doug, and thank you to everyone who has stayed after that inspiring talk to also see these wonderful mentors. It's such a pleasure to be able to honor them today after such a great introduction. For those of you who didn't have the privilege of getting to know Tom Angel, he was the first graduate counselor that we had in graduate division, and he really focused on graduate student wellness and retention and was just so ahead of his time in so many really important ways. And we as a campus benefited so much from his excellent work there. The Tom Angel Fellowship was established in his honor in 2015, and I'm particularly gratified that his daughter Lisa is in the audience with us today to see us be able to honor these wonderful mentors along in his memory. Each year, this fellowship grows in popularity with thanks to the wonderful Office of Inclusive Excellence for promoting the award and putting on this wonderful event. Just as to give you a sense of it, it's been basically doubling every year with a small number of nominations in the first year, last year, many more, and this year, almost 200 nominations for these awards. So these mentors that we are about to honor really are performing just excellent, wonderful, high quality service for the campus. So we'll start with our first honoree today, the Faculty Award. Professor Franklin Dollar from Physics and Astronomy. Professor Dollar's nominator described him as a template for the ideal faculty member, one who is always learning, who knows how and when to push you or when to hold space for you and validate your experiences. We just heard a wonderful talk about how important those features really are. Professor Dollar spends hours upon hours mentoring his students both within and outside of his own research group, guiding them through the hurdles of what we often refer to as the unwritten curriculum of graduate school. He unabashedly stands up and corrects issues around race and sexuality, including microaggressions that we all know are so easy to ignore, but he doesn't, and he stands up for his students and makes a point to do research and really better himself when he learns about his mentees' needs. And that goes back to that issue of we're all growing and learning. He's the faculty lead for the PACE Peer Mentoring Program for first-year graduate students. And the nominator ends, and I really want to use this quote because it is so powerful. The nominator ended the nomination with, "He is continuously going above and beyond. He makes the physics and astronomy community a better, more inclusive space for all students." And so I want to join all of you to, at home, I guess, virtually applaud Professor Dollar's wonderful contributions to diversity and inclusion and mentoring on our campus. Professor Dollar, is there anything you'd like to say briefly?
Yeah, I want to thank Grad Division and the family of Tom Angel, who's here today. It's very exciting for the award. I'm very honored and humbled to be nominated. I'd also like to thank the nominator, who is soon to be Dr. Ariana Long, who is also a former recipient of the Tom Angel Graduate Award. So just very excited, very, very happy. Mentorship means a lot to me, and it really helps build the community that we have. So thank you again.
Thank you so much. And now we will move over to our Graduate Student Award, Nima Yolmo from Anthropology. One of Nima's nominators states that she exhibits a strong desire to contribute to her community through mentorship and to engage with it through active thought and conversation. She is described as both purposeful and intentional with her mentoring, and she's been a wonderful interconnect peer mentor for us in graduate division, so we are very grateful for her service. She enhanced her knowledge by going above and beyond to actually get training on how to be a more aware and inclusive mentor through the Mentoring Excellence Program. And since 2018, she has also served as the grad student rep and graduate mentor for the Anthropology Graduate Undergraduate Mentorship Program, where she provides mentorship and guidance on grant writing, research questions, methods, and resources to our many first-generation undergraduate students. Nima displays leadership and innovation in mentoring campus-wide, ensuring that the positive effects of mentoring and engagement programs are incorporated into a variety of academic curriculum and campus initiatives. And we are just so grateful to have such an engaged graduate student serving on our campus. Nima, I'll hand it to you if you'd like to say anything quickly.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very honored and humbled again to be here to receive the Tom Angel Award. I'd like to give a shout out to my current mentees, Maria, Cynthia, Tariq, and Tawfiq. Thank you all for being so amazing and keeping me steady and mindful in this task of learning together and finding strength collectively in things that are both joyous and unnerving. I've gained so much from being at UCI intellectually, but even more so crucially in terms of friendships that I hold dear. I'm very much committed to contributing to the steady task of recuperating and repairing the context where university settings, as historically elite institutions, are often ill-equipped, both structurally and interactionally, to respond to different student needs. And I would like to acknowledge how I have benefited tremendously from the invaluable mentorship of my professors in anthropology, history, GSS, and Complit, but also friends and invaluable colleagues in the staff, the IMTFI, at the Graduate Resource and Counseling Center, the International Peer Connect Program, and our dear, dear librarians, all of whose integrity, intellectual rigor, and attention to student well-being, I hope to emulate and take forward in small measure. So thank you all.
Thank you so much. And I love the inclusion of friendship as a strong and important part of mentorship, as we don't always remember that. Finally, it is my pleasure to announce this year's Postdoctoral Scholar Award, Dr. Victor Pham from Microbiology and Molecular Genetics. One nominator wrote, "For as long as I have known Victor, he has wanted to teach and sculpt young minds into the next generation of scientists." Dr. Pham equips his students with vital skill sets that aren't necessarily part of the curriculum, such as literature research, designing and conducting experiments, data analysis, and even that inevitable troubleshooting that we all do. Several of Dr. Pham's nominators described how they were given independent projects which really enabled them to develop their leadership and critical thinking abilities. And additionally, many of his nominators expressed their gratitude for the opportunity to co-author publications which have helped them achieve their own academic goals. He motivates his students to reflect on their own aspirations, to create their own personalized plans, to create realistic timelines to achieve both their short and long-term goals. And he's engaged in numerous outreach programs to actively recruit and mentor 14 undergraduate and 2 graduate students, all of whom graduated and advanced their careers. Now that's a bigger load than many faculty take on, so that is really to be applauded. Dr. Pham is a recipient of the Outstanding Support and Partnership Award, an award given for his service in helping others pursue and succeed in science. And as one nominator writes, while managing multiple projects and collaborations, Victor still looked out for his students' success by promoting weekly meetings to foster his students and colleagues with their reading and critical thinking skills. These are exactly the kinds of future faculty and leaders that we hope to cultivate here at UCI, and we're so grateful to have you here as a postdoctoral scholar. Victor, do you want to say anything quickly?
Yeah, sure. So thank you so much. So I'm very grateful to receive this Tom Angel Nomination Award, and would like to thank the Graduate Division for promoting this and offering this. I'm also very thankful and also proud of all my students. I don't have time to list all the names, but this award actually means a lot to me. So this award is evident that my students have been doing extraordinarily well in their career goals, which is kind of everything that I strive for. So it's been a privilege to be their mentor and seeing them develop and grow to be outstanding professionals in their field. So basically, thank you guys so much. And this means a lot. So much appreciated.
Thank you so much. And congratulations again to all of our Tom Angel Award winners. You truly make the university a better place to be. And with that, I will hand it back to Vice Chancellor Haynes for our next set of awards.
Thank you, Jillian, for your continued engagement with the Office of Inclusive Excellence. And I want to add my congratulations to colleagues for receiving the Tom Angel Fellowships. Now I am pleased to welcome an invaluable member of the Office of Inclusive Excellence team, Dr. Roxanne Silver. Roxy, as she is known to us, is a professor in the departments of psychological science in the School of Social Ecology and in the School of Public Health. Her work brings tremendous insights as an associate director for developing pathways to the professoriate, and she leads our efforts with Decade Mentors and among other programs, which she will provide more detail about as she recognizes members with the Francis M. Leslie Decade Mentor Excellence Award. Thank you for joining us, Roxy.
Thank you so much, Doug. I really appreciate your introduction. It's my pleasure to announce the recipient of the Francis M. Leslie Decade Mentor Excellence Award. The Decade program was the brainchild of Francis Leslie, former dean of UCI's graduate division for over 10 years. Dean Leslie recognized that the success of our graduate programs depended on an inclusive climate that ensured that all students thrived regardless of their backgrounds. Therefore, she designed the Decade program, which stands for Diverse Educational Community and Doctoral Experience. This program provides support for our graduate students and programming toward their success. The Decade Mentor program identifies one faculty member per graduate program who is committed to ensuring an inclusive environment for graduate success. Since its start, 125 faculty members from across the campus have served in this role. Since 2019, the Office of Inclusive Excellence has identified a recipient of the Francis M. Leslie Decade Mentor Excellence Award. Unfortunately, because of COVID-19, last year's recipient was not announced formally, but today I would like to introduce the 2020 awardee. The 2020 Francis Leslie Decade Mentor Excellence Award recipient is Dr. Sora Han, Associate Professor in the Department of Criminology, Law and Society, the School of Law, and the Department of African American Studies, and serves as the Director of the PhD program in Culture and Theory in School of Humanities. Dr. Han was the Decade Mentor in the Department of Criminology, Law and Society in the School of Social Ecology from 2015 to 2018. Among her many activities, Dr. Han developed programming that impacted students from the undergraduate to graduate level in her department, school, campus, and beyond. For example, she established a race and justice studies emphasis in her department as a means of supporting students with these research interests. She created a graduate diversity recruitment effort focused on California State University campuses, many of which are Hispanic serving institutions. Finally, she established a diversity and justice speaker series to support junior faculty and doctoral students. The legacy of this work makes Dr. Han highly deserving of this award. Congratulations, Professor Sora Han, for your commitment to diversity and inclusion. and perhaps you want to say a few words. Welcome.
Thank you, Roxy. It's embarrassing in the best possible way to receive this award, just because graduate mentoring is the single most gratifying thing that I do here on campus. And it's in many ways the most simple thing because it's so enjoyable. It's just a joy to hear mentors when they talk about what drives them. They're simply passing on gifts that they have received, and I've received many of those gifts in the past. But also, I came just to see you all and to spend time with you all. I consider this work a joy because of all of you. And the one thing I've learned during COVID is that mentoring work is probably one of the most substantial and real kind of modes of human connection in the university that we have, because it sustained me and while we are also dispersed. So I just wanted to say how truly honored I am to receive this award. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I appreciate it. And now I'd like to introduce the recipient of the 2021 Francis Leslie Decade Mentor Excellence Award. The recipient of the 2021 award is Professor Lani Alcaraz from the Department of Drama in the Claire Trevor School of the Arts. Professor Alcaraz served as decade mentor for 8 years, from 2012 to 2020. And I'm sure as he's hearing this and being reminded of that, he is sort of taken aback by how many years he was dedicated and committed to this effort. Professor Alcaraz's commitment and impact as decade mentor can be felt through classroom and production-related events, and from graduate recruitment through commencement. He built a feeder program with a prominent Hispanic serving institution, resulting in a large number of Hispanic and Latinx students enrolling in the drama degree programs at UCI. He founded Brown Bag Theater, UCI's only Latinx-focused theater club, which he has used to present work by Latinx writers, to build an empowered community among the Latinx drama students and their allies, and brought attention to issues surrounding the UCI Latinx community. This work also paved the way for the establishment of 3 other affinity-based theater clubs for Asian, Black, and LGBTQ+ students. He has been a transformative leader on the campus, and he is highly deserving of this award. Congratulations, Professor Lani Alcaraz, for your commitment to diversity and inclusion. Would you like to say a few words?
Sure. Thank you. First, I just really appreciate receiving this award. Thank you to Office of Inclusive Excellence and specifically Vinnie Oliveri for the nomination on behalf of the School of the Arts. Being a decade mentor has really empowered me to work with lots of amazing students and sort of fight for underrepresented students. As Roxy said, the work with Brown Bag Theater Company would not have been possible without the support from Decade. We formed that group the first year that we received grant money from Decade. We've produced over 20 productions in the last 8 years and have had well over 200 graduate and undergrad students go through that group. We now have a strong alumni group as part of Brown Bag, and Brown Bag has been a great mentoring group for the other underrepresented groups that have started in the last few years. Mentoring for me is really letting the student know that they have a voice and letting them know that what they have to say is important, and then just letting them do it and being there as much of a support as I can be. So I want to thank Roxy for being there for me in the time I was a decade mentor, and I thoroughly enjoyed my time with Decade and just really appreciate this award. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lani. And now I'm going to hand it back to Vice Chancellor Douglas Haynes, who is going to be presenting the next award.
Thank you so much, Roxy, and congratulations, Lani. I want to acknowledge again, Lani and also Sora for their continued leadership in advancing inclusive excellence while during their service as decade mentors, but always as faculty in their respective units. I now want to turn to the inaugural Carol Connor Equity Advisor Impact Award. UCI has been a pioneer in many ways while still acknowledging the climb ahead for future success. One of the pivotal programs that shaped our office and our work was that of receiving a National Science Foundation Award 20 years ago that helped to foster the current UCI Advanced program for faculty diversity. And as you've heard, it formed the basis for the Decade Mentor Program. I am pleased that an academic senate review acknowledged the valuable roles played by equity advisors, the faculty representative who are based in each academic unit to support their faculty with search efforts, unit climate issues, and overall examination of best practices and policies to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion across the entire campus. In fact, the deans and equity advisors in our STEM units were particularly engaged to contribute ideas for action planning for inclusive excellence that resulted in UCI receiving a bronze award from the esteemed American Association for the Advancement of Science Sea Change program. This is just a brief example because all of our current 19 equity advisors have forged new practices and contributed to plans for greater equity and engagement in their units. Which brings us to our next award that honors one of the mentor heroes. Carol Connor joined UCI in 2016 as a Chancellor's Professor in the School of Education. Before her untimely passing, her research contributions inform the ways that we examine children's language, cognitive, social, and emotional development from preschool through elementary grades, particularly to assess the impacts of special educational activities and technology on instruction and student outcomes through randomized controlled trials. Prior to joining UCI, she served as professor at Arizona State University, and before that, as a distinguished research associate at Florida State University. She was named a fellow of the American Psychological Association and the American Educational Research Association, and also had been recognized for her innovative work at former institutions that included Florida State. She received her PhD from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor in language, literacy, and culture. Carol began her service as an equity advisor in the School of Education in 2017. And while she completed only 2 brief years with us, during that time, she was instrumental in developing the unit's Climate Council. During that time, she also willingly volunteered to broader strategy think about our award programs and faculty mentoring. She had a dynamic style and welcoming personality to engage us all. And the inaugural Carol Connor Equity Advisor Impact Award aims to create a legacy of identifying the drive and dedication that examines a systems approach taken for culture change. I am therefore so honored to recognize my colleague, Professor Zuzana Siwe, Professor of Physics and Astronomy, as the inaugural recipient of the Carol Connor Equity Advisor Impact Award. Professor Siwe was an equity advisor for the School of Physical Sciences from 2013 to 2015. And her nominators, Professor Elizabeth Jarrow and Professor Claire Yu, cited her tireless work during her 2013 term that contributed to the prestigious Claire Booth Luce Professorship support in the school, as well as her organization of UCI-wide programming, including workshops that were part of the UCI Advanced Institute for Equity Diversity that engaged students, faculty, and postdoctoral scholars. At this time, I want to first congratulate Professor Siwe on the praise that she received for her work from her nominators and above all from the campus. And I want to invite her at this time to share brief remarks with us. Please join me in welcoming Professor Siwe.
Thank you so much, Doug. I'm so very grateful and honored to receive the award. And I would like to thank first the Office of Inclusive Excellence for choosing me, and also my nominators, Professor Liz Darwa and Claire Yu. It has been a wonderful, humbling, and learning experience to be part of the advanced program, to be an equity advisor in the School of Physical Sciences, to perform all the duties, to meet with search committees. But first of all, it was a learning experience to be a mentor, to become hopefully a better mentor, and also hopefully a better human being. Thank you so much for the distinction. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Sammy. Really appreciate it. And I just want to say how much I value working with you while you were an equity advisor.
Thank you.
Colleagues, in honor and in respect of your time, I now want to turn to what our program describes as the call to action. And before I do that, I just want to acknowledge the important insights of our keynote speaker, Soledad O'Brien, for her engaging talk. And I want to thank again my colleagues, Vice Provost Jillian Hayes, Associate Director Professor Roxy Silver, for their ongoing leadership to support inclusive excellence. The richness of today's program would not have been possible without the support from the Vice Chancellors in the Office of Information and Technology, the Division of Student Affairs, the Division of Finance and Administration, and UCI Health Affairs. Before closing, I want to highlight several ways that all of us, myself and you, may remain engaged in advancing inclusive excellence. First and foremost, engage with us on the current UCI climate survey. We need to hear from you, and your responses are anonymous, but pivotal in shaping our funding and programming work in the year ahead for UCI and our colleagues at the Medical Center. So if you see an email from me reminding you to complete the survey, just take 10 minutes, no more, to share your responses. Also, participation in the new courses opening for April from our Inclusive Excellence Certificate Program is available. Join us in upcoming events that include the lead recognition ceremony that's scheduled for April 1st and the Creating Excellence Public Forum on April 22nd with engaging presentations from our Chancellor's Inclusive Excellence awardees. I anticipate that next year we will engage UCI members, including alumni, as I am aware about several ways that the Anteater Network continues to excel and engage all UCI members, but particularly our alumni. The tool helps participants to find mentors with various shared interests, and you can join the AntNet today by visiting antnet.uci.edu. Finally, I want to thank all of you again for your involvement, for your attention today. Your demonstrated enthusiasm to create positive change matters to so many people. It matters whether you're at home or on the Irvine campus or the Orange campus. It helps UCI maximize human potential. And finally, mentoring not only is a way to maximize one's potential, but I also believe it's a way for each of us to deepen our capacity for empathy. So thank you again for joining us. We look forward to seeing you at future events and at next year's Mentoring Achievement for Excellence. Thank you.